Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. Please take your seats. Good afternoon, everyone. We have our quorum. Before we come back to document 66.2.2, which Kenya introduced before our break, I have had a request from a party to join a working group. on the basis that the region was not represented on the working group. So I've taken that into consideration, and I've agreed for Kuwait to be nominated to the working group on document 25 on the Gender Action Plan. So I will open the floor to party interventions on document 66.2.2. South Africa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. South Africa welcomes the proposal by Kenya. However, South Africa believes that an important discussion like this should involve all African elephant range states. We believe that Kenya is keen to consult South Africa and other African range states who were not consulted on document 66.2.2. South Africa supports, in principle, the idea of providing funding to support conservation efforts in African elephant range states. However, South Africa feels that the conditions that accompany such a fund should not be cumbersome. We are of the view that all African range states are part of the African Elephant Fund, which does not contain any conditions that exclude any member from participating in the fund. The fund is governed by all range states, and thus the voice of all range states is heard. We suggest supplementing this fund and use the fund to support African range states. In relation to INF Doc 84, South Africa participated in a recent workshop organized by the Secretariat in Nairobi on innovative finance mechanisms to improve sustainable finance for elephant conservation. South Africa strongly supports the development of these finance mechanisms. In fact, South Africa is the recipient of the World Bank Rhino Conservation Bond, the first green bond of its kind in the world. However, we note the challenge with scaling these initiatives, including the conditions for setting up these funding instruments. Because of this, it will take long to develop these instruments. This is why we propose using the African Elephant Fund to support elephant conservation while we develop these other mechanisms for sustainable finance of elephant conservation. South Africa thus do not support document 66.2.2. Instead, South Africa would like to suggest that the revised document that allow for extensive consultation with and agreement by all range states be submitted to CoP20 for consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, South Africa. I see Niger. Niger, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Niger, after having considered the document which has been presented by Kenya, supports the proposal as presented by Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you, Niger. Botswana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Botswana would wish to remind the meeting that in 2010, at the 14th meeting of the Conference of Parties, parties adopted Resolution COM 16.9 on the African Elephant Action Plan and the African Elephant Fund, which was established in order to provide resources to implement the African Elephant Action Plan. To date, the fund has not received the support initially envisaged, but we firmly believe that the establishment of another fund would be an unnecessary duplication and serve to undermine the African Elephant Fund. We are also not in support of criteria which compel range states to destroy ivory stockpiles in order to access funds for elephant conservation and management. We are unable to support the proposal as put forth in document 66.2.2. We would, however, be willing to work with interested parties to consider innovative funding mechanisms to generate much-needed funds to support elephant conservation and management. We are amenable to accepting the amended decisions as proposed by the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Botswana. Gabon, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gabon supports the document COP19 Doc 66.2.2. Indeed, Gabon has 95,000 elephants. That's over 60% of total forest elephants. In 2012, Gabon was the first Central African country to destroy its ivory stockpile. And then it committed globally to remove ivory from any commercial use. Indeed, stockpiles maintain demand by sending a signal for potential future value. In addition, the stockpiles will increase from year to year due to seizures and other management issues, and this leads to security concerns. Several scientific studies have shown the presence of government-held ivory in national seizures. Therefore, this is a matter of concern when it comes to elephant conservation. Given the high costs of conservation, Gabon supports the idea that countries should receive compensation for their conservation efforts, the benefits of which have been proven, particularly when it comes to Central African forests, which play a major role in preventing climate change and global warming. Forest elephants are essential within this ecosystem and play a vital role in carbon storage within these forests. The survival of these elephants is essential to the survival of the planet. Therefore, we support the proposal found in paragraph 24 of document 66.2.2. Thank you.
Thank you. Gabon. Tanzania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving United Republic of Tanzania a chance to contribute on this one. The proposal submitted by Kenya intended to establish a fund for voluntary disposal of the ivory stockpile, which, in our opinion, we find is like selling the ivory in that manner. Tanzania aligns itself with Botswana. We are quite sure that the African Elephant Fund that has been established has continued to provide the needed resources to conserve elephants. However, the fund has received less support as it was intended. It is not very clear why the fund has received less support from the potential donor and how the proposed fund by Kenya is going to be different. Therefore, Tanzania encouraged donors to contribute funds through African Elephant Fund because the criteria and the existing framework of this fund will meet the need of the African elephant range state. Kenya's proposal of the criteria of ivory stockpile destruction are unacceptable. Therefore, Tanzania does not support this proposal. I submit.
Thank you, Tanzania. United States of America.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since the 17th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, 6 African elephant species proposals have been submitted for consideration by the parties. Every one of these proposals failed to achieve the 2/3 majority vote required for adoption, and therefore all of the proposals were rejected by the parties. Even here at the CoP19, 2 competing African elephant proposals have been submitted that will be considered by the parties later this meeting. If the outcome of both African elephant proposals follow past experience, it would appear that CITES has reached a stalemate, an ivory dilemma. Some range states have expressed their concerns about the failure to be recognized for good elephant management or receive much needed revenue from a legal ivory stockpile sale, while other parties have expressed their concerns against the legal commercial sale of any ivory. This stalemate is unsustainable. We need to develop a solution that benefits African elephants by generating revenue to fund implementation of national elephant management plans and anti-poaching strategies that support community-based initiatives for conserving elephant habitat, dispersal areas and movement corridors, and that serve local communities who coexist with elephants on their lands. But we also need to continue to protect elephants from the poaching crisis fueled by commercial markets for elephant ivory. For the solution to be successful, we need to find common ground. The solution needs to give everyone, countries and elephants, some part of what they need. Therefore, the United States supports the recommendations and draft decisions outlined in document CoP19 Doc 66.2.2 and the proposed intersessional working group mandate to further develop the terms and conditions for establishing a fund for elephant range states to access upon the non-commercial disposal of their ivory stockpiles and to support conservation efforts. Non-commercial disposal of ivory stockpiles ensures that ivory is put beyond commercial use and would eliminate those ivory stockpiles, sending a global message through its destruction that the ivory will no longer have a monetary value. The United States does not support the draft decisions recommended by the Secretariat, as these are issues that can be discussed within the margins of the intersessional working group proposed in the document. However, should the Secretariat's draft decision...
United States, you're over 3 minutes, so I'm just going to give you a warning if you wouldn't mind wrapping up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The United States believes the concept proposed by Kenya has great merit, and the technical details and mechanisms require thoughtful discussion and input from African elephant range countries. We urge all parties to support this document and demonstrate to the world that the only value ivory holds is the living elephant. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, United States. I'm going to close the list of parties that I have now because I've got a good number of parties and I'd like to hear from these parties and then have a think about where we are. So I will take Switzerland. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Switzerland supports in general the recommendation on this document because we are convinced that we need new solutions, new proposals, and that might be one of them to become or to get some better outcomes in the future. So I think there is still some work to do, but in general, it's a good document and we support the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland. United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to thank Kenya for bringing forward this important proposal. Finding innovative solutions for sustainable nature financing is absolutely critical if we're to successfully reverse biodiversity loss, something that will rightly feature prominently in discussions at the forthcoming CBD COP15. The UK remains of the view that any resumption of commercial trade in ivory risks stimulating demand, which would quickly outstrip supply, ultimately incentivising poaching and driving further declines in elephant populations. However, we do acknowledge the financial burden that management of stockpiles places on parties, and as such, we are keen to see solutions coming forward that support range states in conserving elephants, protecting livelihoods, and supporting those communities that live alongside large wild animals. We therefore consider that this proposal warrants further discussion and expansion. It should be considered alongside other options for sustainable finance and extend more widely than just ivory. Further, it is important that funding under any model is not directly linked to the quantity of ivory being disposed of, to avoid unintended consequences, including incentivising the harvesting of ivory. In conclusion, the UK supports adoption of the draft decisions proposed by the Secretariat, including to establish an intersessional process with a standing committee for considering issues, options and models relating to sustainable financing for conservation, and for this to report to COP20. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United Kingdom. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Japan appreciates the proposal if all of the range states of African elephant consent to discuss in accordance with the proposal. If so, we would like to point out that steps would be taken first to review and evaluate the existing African elephant conservation fund. Then to propose the structure of the fund based on the extract improvement points derived from the analysis of the existing fund. However, destruction of stockpile may not be the starting point of the discussion, and Japan does not consent such precondition. Since we recognize that southern part of African countries have deepened the financial support, and they have succeeded through sustainable use of wildlife and have contribution both conservation and sustainable development of a rural area. In this regard, Japan would like to reiterate that destruction of the stockpile is not the starting point. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. Zimbabwe, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, we appreciate Kenya's proposal, but we are opposed to it for the following reasons. There is the African Elephant Fund. Hence, creation of another fund may create unnecessary duplication and overlaps. We suggest the issue be deferred and proceed by the way of dialogue to allow further consultations amongst the African elephant range states. We, however, support recommendations of the Secretariat. I submit.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. Mali, you have the floor.
Merci bien, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm taking the floor to state that creating a fund accessible to range states upon non-commercial disposal of ivory stockpiles is something which is of interest to my country. The document presented by Kenya, well, my country supports it. However, let me say the following. The existence of stockpiles and calls for sales or buyouts can lead to hopes of the resumption of ivory trade, which risks perpetuating illegal trade and poaching. As you are aware, Madam Chair, a fund is a fund. Kenya's idea is to bring all range states together to ensure that with this fund, the range states would have access to funds which are higher than the benefits linked to trade in ivory. And we believe that this could help to sustain efforts to protect elephants. And therefore, Mali supports Niger, the United States, and Switzerland, as well as the proposal by Kenya. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mali. Togo, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Madam Chair. After considering Kenya's proposal and having listened to the comments from Gabon, and given the merits of this proposal, we support Kenya's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Togo. Guinea-Bissau, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The only way to ensure conservation of species is to have a fund accessible for range states. Guinea-Bissau, therefore, supports document 66.2.2 as proposed by Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you, Guinea-Bissau. Eswatini, you have the floor. Eswatini, if you could press your speaking button once more, the technicians will give you the floor. If you can press the button on your console. Thank you, technicians. Eswatini.
Thank you, Chair. The Kingdom of Eswatini is aligning itself with the previous speakers, which is Botswana, Tanzania, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. So therefore, we strongly do not support the proposal by Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you, Eswatini. Ethiopia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ethiopia is one of the countries who disposed its ivory stockpile of 6.1 ton in the year 2015. Therefore, Madam Chair, in order to ensure the sustainable conservation of this species, Ethiopia supports the proposal of document 66.2.2 as submitted by Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethiopia. My final speaker is India. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We appreciate the efforts made by Kenya for bringing forth this innovative idea for funding elephant conservation through non-commercial disposal of government-held ivory stockpiles. We fully agree that the conservation should not lead conflicts and people supporting conservation should be suitably compensated. Therefore, India feels aligned and agreed with the views of Secretariat given in para 19.AA and 19.BB in CoP19 Doc 62.22, which creates an opportunity for further discussion and ideation on this issue. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, India. That ends my party list. I would like to take some observers. Observers, you have the floor. Oh, I now have parties requesting the floor. European Union.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The EU and its member states appreciate the proposal and fully recognizes the need for resources for the management of African elephant populations to assist range states in living together with these animals. Although the EU does not think a resumption of ivory trade is in order, we feel this proposal is looking at the issue of sustainable financing in a too narrow way. We think there is a need for a broader discussion on this, and we therefore support the recommendations as proposed by the CITES Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. I will take the few parties on my list, but I will close my party list. So I have Zambia followed by China.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Zambia is in line with the other states, Zimbabwe, Botswana, in rejecting this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Zambia. China.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is a complex issue. On one hand, it is fully understood that the conservation fund is badly needed, especially in the Build Back Better period after COVID-19. China attended CITES roundtable on sustainable wildlife finance, African elephant conservation in the end of last month. On the other hand, as China has expressed in Doc 66.2.1, destroy is not the only way to dispose ivory, let alone the only way to obtain funds. Although we cannot stop ivory from naturally occurring, the stockpile held by the United States government is limited. It means that the mode proposed in this document is unsustainable. In general, China supports a continuous search for funding mechanism as proposed by the Secretariat. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. China, Guinea.
Merci.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the proposal made by Kenya can be supported by Guinea. This fund is indispensable and necessary because it will guarantee understanding of fighting against organized crime, its scope, in order to efficiently combat this crime. This fund will will focus on the illegal aspects of this, and this can only be effective when there is a fund that is necessary and available. Therefore, we will side with Kenya. Thank you.
And my final party is Namibia. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Chair, for the floor. Namibia aligns itself with comments expressed by Botswana, Zimbabwe, and other range states. Therefore, Namibia does not support the proposal. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Namibia. I will take David Shepherd, Wildlife Foundation, followed by Suko SA, followed by Amber Selly. I would ask our observers to please keep your interventions as brief as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm making this intervention on behalf of David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation, Centre for Biological Diversity, and Fondation Franz Weber. We welcome this proposal from Kenya, which could provide a permanent solution to the problem posed by ivory stockpiles. In 2020, over 620 tons of stockpiled ivory was declared by 17 parties. But with 44 parties believed to have undeclared ivory stocks, the amount of ivory stockpiled globally is certainly far higher. This global stockpile is increasing daily and leaking into trade. The only workable solution is destruction. As Kenya noted, we need to scale up financing for elephant conservation. It is essential to ensure that practices that detract from conservation, like the maintenance and security of ivory stockpiles, are replaced with conservation-positive actions. The continued maintenance of growing ivory stockpiles sends a dangerous signal that ivory trade might resume. Destruction of those stockpiles in return for finance to support conservation efforts based on needs could provide a way forward, both for elephants and for people who coexist with them. We thank Kenya for submitting this concept and look forward to its further development in a way that results in the permanent removal of stockpiles and does not stimulate further demand for ivory. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, David Shepherd. Suko SA, followed by Amber Selly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I make this intervention on behalf of Suko SA and several other observers, a list of which will be provided in written form. The proposal made by Kenya regarding funding for range states for the so-called non-commercial disposal, which essentially means willful destruction, is extremely cynical. The purpose of any harvest, including the gathering from natural mortalities, is for gain over benefit. A payment for destruction remains a payment. Ivory will continue to be produced and therefore require some form of processing, particularly in the southern African range states where elephants remain in abundance and appear to be increasing rapidly, given that secure populations of elephants double their numbers approximately every 10 years. Is this to become a cash cow milked by anti-sale range states ad infinitum, while never actually achieving the strategic objective of this convention, being that trade in the species does not lead to its demise? It now seems that a model of keeping a species in status limbo appears to be an attractive-looking windfall for some parties. Africa should not need to commit itself to an unlimited period of being donor or fund reliant in relation to wholly renewable natural biological resources.
Many of our finite resources, far more ecologically damaging in terms of their exploitation, don't enjoy this unwarranted attention. Ivory carries an unscientific but emotional elevation of its relevance, indicated clearly by its unique appearance in the logo of this very convention. Conservation is not about destroying and wasting natural resources. It is about their wise use. This proposal keeps Africa poorer by ensuring their continued dependence on external or international funding. Most importantly, this proposal provides no motivation to ensure elephant conservation is applied on the ground and by communities, as they remain more valuable dead than alive. Madam Chair, this proposal would set a dangerous precedent and will have unintended consequences when, as is inevitable, other species are dragged down the same path due to the precedent being set. The Sustainable Use Coalition Southern Africa urges parties to steer back to the path this convention exists to perform, which is the regulated trade at a sustainable level. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Suko SA. And finally, Amboseli, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. On behalf of the Amboseli Ecosystem Trust, I speak in support of the proposal that is on the table that definitely will avert the speculation of opening up markets that lead to poaching and killing of communities in Africa. If it is resources for communities and conservation, this proposal would address that. For holistic support for elephant protection and conservation, I speak in support of the proposal establishing a fund accessible to the elephant range states. Thank you.
Thank you, Amboseli. And just before I sum up our discussions, you'll notice a lot of our colleagues from next door arriving in the room. We're having a small problem with the room next door. I'm advised there's no problem with this room, and hopefully it will be resolved shortly. But welcome, Committee 1 to Committee 2. We are just wrapping up our discussions on ivory. So thank you, everyone, for your interventions. And thank you, Kenya, for your proposal. What I'm hearing is that there are a number of parties opposed to the adoption of the document. Slightly more parties in support of adopting these decisions. But what I'm hearing is that the majority of parties who've spoken are in support of the Secretariat's proposed decisions. So I would like to, I'm turning to Kenya here as the proponent to see their views on the Secretariat's proposed decisions as a way forward. Kenya, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, Kenya's proposal was to have an intersessional working group established to explore this matter further. Madam Chair, we took great exception from the proposal from the Secretariat because in very honest terms, the issue we've been trying to deal with is what was raised by the United States. We've been to the COPs discussing ivory sales and listing proposals, and the results is like obvious even in this COP. Madam Chair, we are coming with a solution to deal with stockpiles, and we are amenable to expand the scope of our proposal to accommodate other sustainable ways of financing, particularly elephant conservation that has turned out to be a political animal. Madam Chair, just like climate financing, and we saw at the very beginning of this COP about talking about numbers of species to relate to the votes of parties. If you have many elephants, then you have more votes. I think what this proposal is trying to say, if you have many elephants, then you should be able to be compensated more by the number of stocks that you have. So to answer you, Madam Chair, we'll be comfortable to work in a wording within our decisions that accommodate what the Secretariat is proposing, but not the other way around. We want the accommodating the thoughts of the Secretariat within the decisions that we are proposing in expanding the scope beyond just looking at stockpile, but other funding mechanism. To us, the stockpile issue is a quick win. It's quick. If parties agree on a mechanism, it can be achieved even before the next COP, and we'll plow back these funds back to support the challenges that faces elephants, from connectivity, community livelihoods, human-elephant conflict, and law enforcement. So in summary, Madam Chair, we want to request the COP to look at our decisions. It's very clear is we are not setting the fund now. We are setting a working group to look at the mechanics, the TOR we proposed, how it will work. And if we want to expand that scope beyond stockpile, then let's look at the elements in the Secretariat's recommendation to fit in the decisions that we proposed, not the other way around. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Kenya. So I think you have offered me a way forward. I don't want to strike a formal working group on this, but Kenya, I note your willingness to consider your decisions and the suggestions of the Secretariat, and I would invite you, I will leave this item open, we won't close it. We'll invite you to take the weekend and maybe the first day next week to work with your colleagues, anyone who's interested in this, to work in the margins with Kenya on coming back to us with a COM-doc, an in-session document with revised decisions. So that's my proposed way forward. Thank you, Kenya. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So we understand that in Committee 1 there was a strong diesel smell or gas smell, and that's why the room has been evacuated for the moment as a precautionary measure. So we would like to ask you that if you smell something like a gas smell or diesel fuel smell, please alert the Chair. Because on the podium we're not smelling anything, but if anyone smells something, please let us know. Thank you. There.
Animal Welfare Institute. Don't see anybody requesting. David Shepherd, Wildlife Foundation. I don't see a lot of people down the front here. No, everyone all right? Everyone's happy and healthy down the front here? Okay, we will keep an eye on the situation. So I would like to move on to COP19 Document 28. National laws for implementation of the convention. Animal Welfare Institute.
Thank you, Chair. There is a very strong smell of fumes at the back of the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Animal Welfare Institute. Mali.
Merci bien.
Thank you, Chair. In the face of such a situation, it would be under our responsibility in this situation, I would suggest that you suspend the discussions and let people leave the room. That's just a proposal I'm making for our safety. Thank you, Chair.
We are just having security, the Secretariat and the Convention Centre staff checking for us. Technicians, can you put the quorum on my board, please? The advice I'm receiving is that we can continue. So I would like to continue if I have quorum. Of course, if you're free to do what you feel comfortable with, parties. Since we are still well in quorum, I would like to continue. Mauritania.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for giving me the floor. I think we can continue with the meeting to make up time because we still have a lot of things to discuss before us. And for which a solution needs to be found. In keeping with the rules of procedure of CITES and CITES's vision, I think it is extremely important. The animal species we're talking about need to be conserved. And so the proposal needs to be supported by all parties. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mauritania. Yes, I think I'm aware of how much I don't want to lose any time if we don't have to. The advice from UN Security is that we do not need to evacuate this room, so I will continue based on their advice. That's their role here at the meeting. So I would like to turn to CoP19 Document 28, National Laws for the Implementation of the Convention. This document has been prepared by the Secretariat, so I'll invite the Secretariat to introduce it. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the National Legislation Project, which was established at COP8 in Kyoto in 1992. The Secretariat will host a side event to celebrate this anniversary on Tuesday, November 22nd, starting at 12:15 p.m. You are, of course, all warmly invited to attend. To date, 108 parties have legislation placed in Category 1 under the NLP, and 72 parties have legislation placed in Category 2 or 3, meaning that the legislation of these parties does not yet meet the minimum requirements of the Convention. Since COP18, the legislation of 4 additional parties has been placed in Category 1, along with the legislation of 5 territories. At SC 74, the Standing Committee agreed on a recommendation to suspend commercial trade with 6 parties if they did not take significant steps to adopt national legislation for the implementation of the Convention by May of this year. With the exception of São Tomé and Príncipe, all parties responded to the Secretariat and took significant action within the deadline. The Secretariat therefore issued a notification to the parties to reflect the recommendation to suspend commercial trade with São Tomé and Príncipe. At SC 74, the Standing Committee also requested the Secretariat to send a formal warning to parties that had not reported any legislative progress for more than 3 years. 10 parties were concerned and were requested to report to the Secretariat on progress made in national legislation by the 1st of September of this year. Most of them have sent updates to the Secretariat. The document also reports on the capacity building activities carried out by the Secretariat and introduces an emerging issue, namely how to deal with exceptional circumstances that prevent the normal functioning of CITES at the national level. Based on this report, the Secretariat invites the Conference of the Parties to adopt the draft decisions contained in Annex 1 and delete decisions 18.62 to 18.67. The Secretariat would also like to express its special thanks to those parties that have responded to the concerns of the Standing Committee, including Dominica, Grenada, Kazakhstan, Libya, and Mongolia, but also Azerbaijan, Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Maldives, Montenegro, and Zambia. The Secretariat is in the process of analyzing all the documents received. The Secretariat would also like to thank all the donors who have contributed to the implementation of the NLP, in particular Switzerland, the European Union, and the Netherlands. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I'll open the floor to parties. Maldives, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Maldives welcomes the efforts of the Secretariat in preparation of the document CoP19 Doc 28. We welcome the assistance provided to the Member States through the National Legislation Project to formulate national legislations for the implementation of the Convention. We note that Maldives, previously placed on Table 2, recently exceeded parties of the document status of the legislative progress for the implementation of the Convention has been included in Table 1 as Maldives exceeded the Convention 8 years ago, and our legislation is placed in Category 3 pending the adoption of CITES implementing legislation. Understanding that at the 74th Standing Committee, the Standing Committee has requested the Secretariat to issue a formal warning to the parties that have not reported any legislative progress for more than 3 years, in which the formal warning was sent to Maldives amongst the 9 countries, requesting to take immediate steps to ensure progress to be made before this COP and to report such progress by the to the Secretariat by 1st September 2022. In this regard, parties with the legislation in Category 2 or 3 under the National Legislation Project have been urged to submit to the Secretariat as soon as possible in one of the 3 working languages of the Convention's details of appropriate measures that have been adopted for the effective implementation of the Convention. As such, parties were also urged to keep the Secretariat informed of the legislative progress at any time. Maldives, having received assistance from the National Legislation Project to formulate national legislation, have made efforts complying with the obligations of the Convention to be placed in Category 1. Thus, complying with the formal warning issued by the Secretariat at the recommendation of the Standing Committee, Maldives has submitted to the Secretariat an English translation of the national legislation governing the implementation of CITES Convention prior to the deadline informed by the Standing Committee as referred at SC 74 document 26 paragraph 38 paragraph C. Maldives ratified its national legislation implementing CITES in July. Maldives, having made substantial progress prior to the COP in adopting measures to implement the Convention and having reported such to the Secretariat, complying to the Standing Committee's formal warning, Maldives thus requests the Secretariat to acknowledge the efforts of Maldives to be reflected specifically to those references, paragraphs 8 and 26 of document, followed with subsequent changes as necessary to echo Maldives' compliance to this regard. We note that the status of the legislative progress for implementing CITES has now been updated to illustrate that the legislation has been adopted in July, received in English, and that upon revised legislative analysis, pending comments from the Secretariat, including the possibility of Category 1 status. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Maldives. Uganda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, the Uganda appreciates the work so far done by the Secretariat in compiling this report. Madam Chair, Uganda would like to appreciate also the guidance so far provided by the Secretariat in enabling us to come up with the appropriate policies and laws in response to the decisions of the COP. Madam Chair, Uganda has made substantial progress in reviewing the wildlife laws. We did review the Wildlife Act 2000 in 2019, and we've been formulating a couple of regulations to domesticate CITES in Uganda. We should say, Madam Chair, that we have one of the most appropriate laws in the region with serious and highly deterrent penalties for wildlife criminals, including life imprisonment. Madam Chair, we have submitted our law to the Secretariat and the draft regulations, but we are yet to receive detailed feedback. So our concern here is the rating, Madam Chair, that we still appear among the 72 countries that are categorized under, and we are under Category 3, yet we've done some bit of positive work and progress, and we feel this categorization should be reviewed in line with the work that has been done in Uganda. Madam Chair, we seek that the Secretariat continues to provide support and assistance as well as feedback so that we are able to move from Category 3. We thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Uganda. I am closing my party list. I have a good number of parties seeking the floor. It's lovely to hear all of your progress, and the comments specific on country statuses will be noted. I am encouraging you to reflect on the recommendations in this document so you can help me find a position for the committee to take. So my list is closed. European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the EU and its member states, I would like to thank the Secretariat for all the work and support given to parties in the national legislation project over the past 30 years and for the development of the model law. An adequate national legislation for the implementation of the Convention is of utmost importance to ensure trade in protected species is legal and sustainable. We therefore urge parties with a warning to submit as soon as possible details of appropriate measures that have been adopted or any progress made for the effective implementation of the Convention. We appreciate and support the identification of new emerging legal issues for future technical and legislative assistance. For example, exceptional circumstances impeding the normal functioning of CITES at national level. We support adoption of the draft decisions contained in Annex 1 to document CoP19 Doc 28, as well as the deletion of decisions 18.62 to 18.67, with one small addition to proposed decision 19 EEH concerning reporting. We would like to suggest to report any progress to the 77th and 78th Standing Committee as appropriate. Decision 19 EEH will then read H, report, and then new text, at the regular meetings of the standing committees as appropriate, and at the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties on progress made with regard to the implementation of Resolution Conf 8.4 in national laws for the implementation of the Convention and decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. We have that edit. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. India has a very long history of wildlife conservation, and the Wildlife Protection Act 1972 was enacted before the text of CITES was adopted. Over the course of time, the Act has been amended to keep pace with the time and requirements, and today it is one of the strictest wildlife protection legislation covering all aspects of wildlife conservation, such as trade, hunting, possession, transport of wildlife, including strict punishment provisions. This year marks the 50th anniversary of its enactment, and the Act has played a crucial role in wildlife conservation success of India. Since the last conference, the Government of India has taken forward the task of incorporating CITES provisions into the national legislation in line with the obligations under the Convention. India would like to apprise the parties that on 2nd August of 2022, the Wildlife Protection Amendment Bill 2022 has been passed by the Lok Sabha, and it is under the consideration in Rajya Sabha, which is the India's upper house of the Parliament. The bill seeks to amend India's Wildlife Protection Act 1972 to fully implement CITES in India. The bill provides for a new chapter on trade in CITES-listed species, including designation of management and scientific authorities, and all provisions of the CITES text regulating the wildlife trade. It also provides for incorporation of the CITES appendices in the Act, and Appendix 1 of the CITES-listed species to be treated on par with the most strictly protected Indian species in terms of punishments for offenses. India remains fully committed for implementation of its obligations under the Convention. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, India. Sri Lanka, you have the floor, followed by Tanzania. Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Chair. Sri Lanka is pleased to inform you that after several years of consultation to find the most appropriate way, in March 2022, the Parliament of Sri Lanka passed an amendment to the Fauna and Flora Protection Ordinance of 1937 to incorporate CITES. This amendment now paves the pathway for us to make regulations to ensure provisions of CITES are reflected in our national law, enabling Sri Lanka to manage emerging issues in relation to conservation and sustainable use. Chair, the mentioned documents have been officially submitted to CITES Secretariat. We appreciate Secretariat's support and request continued support for Sri Lanka in implementation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sri Lanka. Tanzania.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United Republic of Tanzania commends the Secretariat for preparation of COP19, DOC 2018. However, the United Republic of Tanzania is very much concerned about the time that has taken to assess its legislation so that it qualifies and gets uplifted to Category 1 from the current status of Category 2. Madam Chair, Tanzania is among the 19 countries identified as requiring the attention of the Standing Committee as a priority under the National Legislation Project, NLP. While under this status, the United Republic of Tanzania has progressively undertaken several measures to ensure that its legislation qualifies for Category 1 status. These measures include enactment of the CITES implementation regulation for the Tanzania mainland in 2018, enactment of the CITES implementation regulation for Zanzibar in 2019, designation of the Tanzania Wildlife Research Institute, or TAWIRI, as a scientific authority for fauna, and the Tanzania Forest Research Institute, TAFORI, as a scientific authority for flora in 2020. Madam Chair, with this effort, Tanzania is surprised that its legislation has not been considered for Category 1 status for very minor reasons, such as official designation of the scientific authority and official publication of the appendices in the government gazette. Madam Chair, in order to speed up the process, I humbly request you and the chairman of the standing committee, of course, to consider uplifting our legislation into Category 1 under the condition that once approved by this conference of parties, I mean COP19, and once into effect, the new CITES appendices will be published in the Government Gazette. I humbly submit, Chair.
Thank you, Tanzania. Kenya, followed by Georgia. Kenya.
Madam Chair, Kenya would like to thank the Secretariat for preparing the report under Agenda COP19 Doc 28 on the analysis of national laws. Madam Chair, as indicated in paragraph 22 of the document, Kenya has prepared a draft legislation in accordance with the new National Wildlife Policy 2020 to address the categorization of our legislation in Category 1, as well as other emerging issues. We will continue to update the Secretariat on the progress we are making with the review of the legislation, including sharing the draft legislation with the Secretariat to enable Kenya to achieve Category 1 status. Madam Chair, we believe that once Kenya completes the process of the enactment of the new legislation and an analysis of our legislation completed, we will meet the qualification for placement in Category 1 of the national laws for implementation of the convention. Kenya therefore supports the recommendations in Annex 1 of the document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kenya. Georgia, followed by Ecuador.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, we would like to thank the Secretariat for the work in supporting countries in updating the national legislations and also for preparation the analysis presented in this document. We consider the national legislation as a foundation for successful implementation of the Convention. Concerning the legislations of the countries in Category 1, we consider that publishing the national legislations on the CITES website would significantly support implementation of the Convention. This would allow the countries in Categories 2 and 3 to use these legal documents in identifying how the issues they are dealing with are solved in other countries. At the same time, the countries will have an opportunity to obtain information on national legislations in other countries and use it for various purposes in the implementation of the Convention. We welcome the draft decisions outlined in the document. Particularly, I would like to highlight the development of the legislative guidance for the transit and transshipment. Since our legislation also includes article on transit of CITES specimens, however, implementation of this article faces significant challenges, and we consider that this as one of the weakest areas in implementation. Therefore, any guidance on improving relevant legislation would greatly benefit us. We would also like to note that in our region, several countries also have their legislation in the Categories 2 and 3. We consider that the activities outlined in the draft decision 19EE paragraph C would highly benefit those countries. In this process, we would also be happy to share our experience in development of the legislation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Georgia. Ecuador, followed by Niger. Ecuador.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ecuador is taking the floor for the first time, and therefore we'd like to thank you for the excellent organisation of this meeting. We also wish you every success as chair of this committee. Madam Chair, Ecuador is committed to continue developing national frameworks in line with the objectives of the Convention to ensure the effective implementation thereof in our country. Therefore, number MAP 2022-001 of the 16th of November 2022 has been promulgated, and we've also established an organic law as part of the activities of the Ministry for the Environment. We've designated scientific authorities. This information appears on the website of the Ministry, and we will make it available to those interested in this. We're also reviewing an organic law on the environment, particularly when it comes to a chapter on national implementation of CITES. And as soon as this is finalized, we will inform the Secretariat. We would also like to thank the Secretariat and advisors for their assistance provided to Ecuador throughout this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Ecuador, Niger, followed by the United States. Niger.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Niger thanks the Secretariat for supporting Niger in developing its CITES law. It has been a very supportive process. Since 2019, Niger had submitted and approved a CITES law at the level of the National Assembly. The law has already been sent to the Secretariat since 2019. Niger has not heard back from the Secretariat, and we have not been changed in terms of our category, whereas we were one of the first countries to have a CITES law. We're currently classified as Category 3. And therefore, Niger would ask the Secretariat to do whatever is necessary to ensure that our category is changed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. United States, followed by the United Kingdom. United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States agrees that it's critically important for parties to enact CITES implementing legislation, and we're very pleased to hear the updates from a number of parties here. The United States supports adoption of the draft decisions in Annex 1 to document CoP19 Doc 28, with an amendment to delete the word commercial from draft decision 19.AA. While a recommendation by the Standing Committee with regard to a party that has failed to adopt appropriate measures for effective implementation of the Convention may be a recommendation to suspend commercial trade in CITES-listed species, we do not believe that the Standing Committee's action should be limited to commercial trade. The Standing Committee considers appropriate measures to take for each compliance action. We note that Decision 18.65 does not limit the Committee's decision to commercial trade, and we believe that such an approach remains appropriate. We also support deletion of Decisions 18.62 to 18.67. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, United States. I think I heard you refer to 19AA there, but I see commercial in 19DD. Thank you. United States is correct, has confirmed that I am correct. It is decision 19D. D. United Kingdom is the final speaker.
Thank you, Chair. The United Kingdom would like to thank the Secretariat for its report on parties' progress implementing ResConf 8.4 and decisions 1862 to 1867, and for the guidance and support the Secretariat has provided parties to help bring their legislation into compliance with the Convention. We support the adoption of the draft decisions in Annex 1 of Document 28 and the deletion of decisions 1862 to 1867 with some changes. The development of exceptional circumstances guidance proposed in draft decision 19EE, paragraph E, looks to have merit. However, the suggestion in paragraph 49 of Doc 28 that the functions of a party's management authority could be delegated to the Secretariat would appear to raise a range of complex questions. So the UK would suggest that effort is focused on exploring other options. In terms of text changes, we propose that paragraph E of decision 19EE is amended to include a requirement for the Secretariat to submit recommendations to the Standing Committee for consideration. So the change itself would be striking recommend and substituting that with submit its recommendations to the Standing Committee for consideration, including. So that part of the decision reads, proper functioning of CITES at the national level and submit its recommendations to the Standing Committee for consideration, including, as appropriate, possible amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, United Kingdom. We have that. I will take one or two observers with brief interventions if there's interest in speaking on this matter. I don't see any observers requesting the floor. Thank you, everyone, for your updates. It's lovely to hear your progress. For those parties who expressed some concern or some questions to the Secretariat, I'm certain the Secretariat will be very happy to speak to you directly on a bilateral basis about those. So to sum up, because I think we are in a position to do that, I have heard support for the draft decisions in COP19 Document 28 Annex 1 with the amendment proposed by the European Union to 19EE paragraph H, which would have the Secretariat report at the regular meetings of the standing committees as well as at the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. I have heard an amendment from the United States to 19DD to strike the term commercial from the first line. And I have heard an amendment just now from the United Kingdom to, in decision 19EE paragraph E, to strike recommend from the third line and instead insert submit its recommendations to the Standing Committee for consideration, including. And so with that, I think that we can agree the draft decisions contained in Annex 1 to the present document as amended. And I think we can agree to delete decisions 18.62 to 18.67. Thank you, everyone. I think we'll move on. So we are next to consider COP19 document 29.1, implementation of Article 13 and Resolution CONF 14.3, Rev COP 18 on CITES compliance procedures. This document has been prepared by the Secretariat, and I'll ask the Secretariat to introduce it. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Document COP19 Doc 29.1 has been prepared by the Secretariat, and it should be read in conjunction with document COP19 Doc 30 on the Compliance Assistance Programme. The current document provides a report on the activities of the Secretariat when it comes to implementation of Article 13 and Resolution CONF 14.3 Rev COP 18 on CITES compliance procedures. The Secretariat has undertaken as many efforts as possible to fulfill the mandate and instructions provided by the Standing Committee within our limited resources to ensure assistance to various parties. It's important to recall that CITES' approach when it comes to implementation is supportive and non-adversarial with the aim of ensuring long-term compliance. In the 74th Standing Committee meeting, the Secretariat informed the committee on the details of some potential compliance issues. The Secretariat provided an update on progress made on the implementation of recommendations made by the Standing Committee. Regarding these cases, the Secretariat wishes to thank the CITES authorities in those countries for their assistance and for providing the information during the various missions carried out. The report and conclusions will be set out in separate documents of the SC74 once all of the information has been analyzed and once all of the technical missions as mandated by the Standing Committee have been carried out. The Secretariat went to Vietnam, the United Kingdom, the European Union, Germany and Spain within the United Kingdom. For technical missions, we went to China and Cameroon, or rather, these will be carried out after COP19 due to COVID-19 related issues as well as resources related issues. This also applies to verification missions to Bangladesh and Ecuador. As regards cases underway, document provides update on progress made in the implementation of recommendations of the Standing Committee when matters have been examined by the committee, including cases that are underway and cases that have been closed. When it comes to Article 13, in line with the instructions of the Standing Committee, the Secretariat maintained communication with the CITES authorities of countries subjected to these recommendations, the DRC, the Democratic People's Republic of Laos, Japan, Nigeria, and we thank them for their cooperation. I would like to refer now to the expedited Article 13 process concerning Pterocarpus erinaceus mandated by the Standing Committee. A voluntary zero export quota for commercial trade in specimens of Pterocarpus erinaceus was published on the date of the notification for Benin, Burkina Faso, Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Niger, Senegal, and Sierra Leone at their request. Notification number 2022-45 stated that the expedited compliance procedure pursuant to Article 13 was therefore applicable to Cameroon, Chad, Central African Republic, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Mali, and Togo, and a suspension of commercial trade of specimens of Pterocarpus erinaceus from those states became applicable on the date of the notification. This recommendation remains in effect until the parties meet the requirements for NDFs and legal acquisition findings as set out in the document. As regards recommendations, we invite the COP to note information provided in the document and to note information concerning Article 13 expedited process applies to Pterocarpus erinaceus range states to provide its view on the efficacy and desirability of taking such an expedited and range state-focused approach to any future cases of pervasive illegal trade in specimens of CITES-listed species. We also invite the committee to reflect on possible approaches to facilitate the handling of compliance cases in an efficient and expeditious manner while rationalizing the agenda of the Standing Committee and the need to respond quickly to urgent cases involving one or more parties, given the number of ongoing compliance cases and the length of the agenda of the Standing Committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. So I will open the floor to parties. I will have to begin to really enforce my speaking limit. I'd like to put it at 2.5 minutes, so I will give you a warning at 2.5 minutes. I will also be forced, I think, to limit our lists from now on more strictly than I have. I'd also just like to remind everyone that it is difficult to discuss very specific compliance matters in this forum. That is the remit of the Standing Committee. And so with that, I will see Senegal. Senegal, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I would like to thank the Secretariat for the document which was prepared and reflects the reality of assistance developed for countries in our sub-region. Recently, the implementation of Article 13 created a problem between Senegal and Mali, because Mali seemed to have been unaware of the quantities of wood that had been seized by containers. Mali has an important and significant stock of Pericarpus because of COVID. We would like to ask the Secretariat and to ask for assistance for Mali in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. Before I move on, I've just been given an update on the room next door and the room in here. So the testing has been done in this room. There is no problem in this room. There was a small problem next door. They are airing the room out and it should be available in not too long. We will give you an update when Committee 1 is intending to recommence. So I will take Mali. Mali, you have the floor.
Voilà. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank Senegal for anticipating our own intervention. We'd like to thank the Secretariat for the measures taken with regard to implementation of the convention. It should be noted that notification 45 dealt with issues previous to the implementation. And so today we are victims of a retroactive action of implementation which has caused a problem. As Senegal has requested, we would ask that the Secretariat would pay attention to this matter. We have provided an arguments with regard to the facts, and we hope that the same conclusions will continue to prevail. And so we are seeking the indulgence of the Secretariat with regard to the specific case of Mali. We are committed to respecting the provisions of the convention with regard to all the provisions so that exports are carried out within the rules. We would therefore ask for technical and financial support from the Secretariat. Mali, currently, despite progress on implementation measures, we are at Category 2 and we have not received any training or assistance from the Secretariat. And so we have learned by practice. So we would ask for support so that we can make further progress. Madam Chair, following the intervention of my colleague.
Can you briefly wrap up? I will give you a few more seconds if you'd like to finish your statement, but I mean a few seconds.
Yes, that's what I wanted to say. There have been exchanges between Mali and Senegal, and we express our gratitude to Senegal for bringing this matter to the fore. The actions which have been undertaken, we would appreciate actions to be undertaken that would help to alleviate this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mali. Your request is noted. Guinea, you have the floor, followed by Democratic Republic of the Congo. Guinea.
Once again, thank you, Chair. I don't think I will be extensive. We wanted to say that since 2013, it has been said that we have been under CITES sanction, and this has damaged our country. In spite of the efforts made, we find ourselves under these heavy sanctions. We would like to recall that praiseworthy efforts, laudable efforts have been made by our country. We have made efforts that have been notified by CITES. This amount of 12,882 cubic meters. We have problems exporting this timber. And this is because of the reticence of certain maritime companies because of notifications issued by CITES. Since this amount, we have contacted more than 12 maritime companies for export, but they have denied this because they claim that we are under sanctions. And so for more credibility to be accorded to us, we would like the Secretariat to pay attention to the case of Guinea because we have made significant efforts in regard to the recommendations as said before, we have made significant efforts. So we thank you for paying attention, giving further attention to our case.
Your request is also noted, and apparently the room next door is now open for those who'd like to go back to Committee 1, but you are welcome to stay and discuss Article 13 processes with us. My next speaker is Democratic Republic of the Congo, followed by Maldives.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you for giving me the floor, Madam Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank the Secretariat for having prepared document 29.1 and the efforts that they have made. I would like to congratulate the Secretariat. I am pleased to see the Secretariat's recognition of efforts to comply with Article 13. But the report has not noted that we had set up a computerized information management system with regard to timber species, and that this platform improved implementation of CITES by our country and followed the export quotas. There is no more fraud since we have set up a computerized management system which we could share with other countries who so wish. I regret, however, that the Secretariat's report on Article 13 continues to maintain the recommendation to my country with regard to stockpiles of pangolin, whereas my country had already announced that it had abandoned export of pangolin and had been countering illegal exports of pangolin exports.
Delegates and observers make their way back to Committee 1, please.
I'm sorry, Democratic Republic of the Congo, please continue.
Merci, madame.
Thank you. I wanted to continue by saying that my country regrets that there is continued mention of the commerce of stocks as if my country intended to commercialize pangolin stocks since the 18th COP. My country had indicated that it did not have the intention of commercializing pangolin with the destruction of 110 cubic meters of pangolin. However, I take a note of the document that has been submitted by the Secretariat with the comments that I have just made.
Thank you, Democratic Republic of the Congo. I will take Maldives, and then my final speaker from the parties will be European Union. Maldives, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maldives thanks the Secretariat for the document on COP19, Doc 21.1. We would like to make a very brief intervention on the compliance matters pursuant to Resolution Conf 8.1 Rev COP 15. Maldives, having its national legislation ratified in July, having informed to the Secretariat prior to the deadline, this again requests the Secretariat to acknowledge the efforts of the Maldives to reflect significant progress made by Maldives' compliance to this regard. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Maldives. European Union.
Thank you, Chair. The EU and its member states thank the Secretariat for preparing their report. Regarding the expedited and range state-focused approach reported on in paragraphs 33 to 38, we would like to note that this should not be a regular procedure, but that such an expedited procedure is a useful tool for urgent cases of pervasive illegal trade. We also recognize that the length of the agenda for the Standing Committee meetings is creating problems and that the number of ongoing compliance cases contributes to that. Dealing with compliance cases in an efficient manner should be our goal, and we stand ready to engage in discussions on how to achieve that. On the other hand, and given that we see compliance cases as a core responsibility of the Standing Committee, we should also take all the other possible means to reduce the agenda of the Standing Committee. As a general point, we would like to urge parties to collaborate as well as possible to end compliance cases as soon as possible. And then briefly regarding the registration of operations that breed Appendix 1 species in the EU, we value the visit by the Secretariat in the 2 EU member states, Germany and Spain. In our view, the visit was very useful, and we are, of course, available to provide more information to the Secretariat if needed. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. I will take brief interventions from observers if anyone would like to speak on this matter. FAO, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We wanted to make this statement, in fact, during the last agenda item, but there was a technical glitch and you couldn't recognize us, so with your indulgence, we'll make this statement here. In any case, the issue of legislation is related and quite important for compliance and enforcement. So FAO takes the opportunity to congratulate the National Legislation Project on its 30th year anniversary and to commend the NLP for the valuable and useful work carried out with parties in supporting the review and strengthening of national legislation for better implementation, compliance, and enforcement of CITES. FAO is pleased to be associated with the NLP, particularly in relation to implementing CITES in the fisheries sector through national legal frameworks. This work not only serves to achieve the objectives of CITES, but also related to international agreements on fisheries, as well as non-binding instruments adopted under the auspices of FAO. As a result of this collaboration, FAO and the CITES Secretariat in partnership with CITES parties and FAO members, discussed relevant implementation issues which led to the FAO CITES legal study and guide for implementing CITES through national fisheries legal frameworks and subsequent capacity development training on CITES and fisheries with Pacific Island and Caribbean countries. And we believe this work is important to compliance and enforcement. FAO looks forward to continuing the collaboration with the CITES Secretariat and the NLP to expand awareness raising and capacity development to other regions, including Latin America, as well as developing legal database that supports CITES implementation, compliance, and enforcement. FAO, jointly with the CITES Secretariat, will be presenting a proposal to this end at the CITES event on 22nd November, commemorating the 30 years of the National Legislation Project. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, FAO. And I am ready to sum up on this matter. Guinea-Bissau, I do see you asking for the floor. I requested the floor after I opened for observers, but I do note that you are one of the parties that we are discussing in terms of the Pterocarpus erinaceus, so I would like to give you just 2 minutes to take the floor, but in the future it would be helpful if you took the floor during the party section. Guinea-Bissau.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. We had a situation since from 2012 to 2014. We were allowed to export because we were in compliance. We were in category 1. We do not understand why the Secretariat is preventing us from continuing with our activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Guinea-Bissau. So I will sum up our discussions on this, noting that we've had several specific requests, which we note. We have had some discussion on the fact that expedited processes should not be regular, but they are occasionally useful, and the length of the Standing Committee agenda. So I would just like to sum up to say that we note the document, as that is what we are requested to do. We're requested to note the information in the document, and in particular note the information in paragraphs 33 to 38 regarding the expedited process. So we note the document. Thank you. The Secretariat has requested the floor. Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. And just quickly to express that we note with appreciation the discussions between Mali and Senegal, and we are ready to notify the parties of any agreement that you reach on the ongoing issue. The same with Guinea regarding the transport of the stock pile that has been authorized by the Standing Committee. And I take the opportunity to thank all the parties for the hard work, and also would like to highlight that especially for these parties, the intensive care that we are taking almost on daily basis with Guinea and Mali during the last month, trying to help them and assist them in implementing the convention. So probably this will be reflected in a notification to be published soon for informing the parties on the agreement that you are reaching on the issues that you mentioned regarding Pterocarpus erinaceus. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. So we will move on to document 29.2, the 2 documents under 29.2 concerning Totaba McDonald's. As I said, we have 2 documents. The first document, 29.2.1, is the report of the Secretariat, which has been prepared by the Secretariat. The second document, 29.2.2, renewed and updated decisions for COP19, has been submitted by the United States of America. United States of America, I would like to take these two documents together. So I will have the Secretary introduce theirs and then I will turn to you. Thank you. So Secretary, I'd like to welcome you to introduce document 29.2.1, report of the Secretariat. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. The present document, document 29.2.1, provides reporting on the implementation of decisions 18292 to 18295 on Totaba, as well as recommendations agreed by the Standing Committee at its 74th meeting and work undertaken in that regard. It includes reporting on the online meeting of range, transit and consumer states of Totaba and the outcomes of that meeting, the study on vaquita and Totaba called for in Decision 18294, paragraph C, with regards to which the Standing Committee at SC 74 agreed to submit 2 draft decisions to COP19 as presented in the present document and incorporated into the draft decisions presented in Annex 2. The document also informs about the establishment and operationalization of the Trilateral Enforcement Contact Group between China, Mexico, and the USA, the implementation of Decision 18292 by parties, implementation of Decision 18293 by Mexico, and the second mission of the Secretariat to Mexico from 30 May to 6 June 2022. The document also includes several annexes which contains information related to the Trilateral Enforcement Contact Group, Mexico's 5th regular 6-monthly report, the outcomes of the online meeting, and others. The Secretariat note that it provided further reporting to the Standing Committee at SC 75, held on 30 November here in Panama City, regarding the implementation of the decisions on Totaba directed to Mexico and the findings made during the second mission of the Secretariat to Mexico. Based on this reporting, the committee agreed a number of recommendations directed to Mexico. Regarding the second mission of the Secretariat, it was found that good progress has been made by Mexico on some fronts, but several matters of concern were identified during the mission as elaborated upon in the document. Excuse me, Chair. The Standing Committee at SC 74 invited the Secretariat to propose, in consultation with the Standing Committee through its chair and following the second mission to Mexico, revisions to decisions 18292 to 18295 for consideration at COP19. The Secretariat undertook revisions to the decisions in consultation with the chair of the Standing Committee. As presented in paragraph 69 of the document, the COP is invited to adopt decisions 18292 Rev COP19 to 18295 Rev COP19 and draft decisions 19CC and 19DD presented in Annex 2. A clean version of these decisions are included in Annex 3 for ease of reference. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. So I'll invite the United States to introduce COP19 document 29.2.2, renewed and updated decisions for COP19. United States.
Thank you, Chair. The United States presents for consideration COP19 document 29.2.2, which is aimed at updating and strengthening decisions 18.292 to 18.295 to ensure that this critical conservation emergency is adequately addressed. CITES' purpose is to ensure that international trade does not threaten the survival of species in the wild. In this unique case, if we do not take action to ensure compliance with the convention, one CITES Appendix 1 listed species, Totaba, will continue to decline from already dangerously low population levels, while another Appendix 1 listed species, vaquita, faces imminent extinction because of illegal international trade fueled by illegal harvesting. there are around 10 vaquita left in the world. If meaningful action is not taken to immediately halt illegal gillnet fishing, the vaquita may not be here for COP20. This would be the first time a species listed pursuant to the convention has gone extinct. The listings of both species in Appendix 1 has not protected these species because Mexico has not implemented and enforced laws and regulations to prevent illegal harvest and commercial export of Totaba. Compliance matters must be treated seriously and should be dealt with in an equitable manner across all parties to the convention. Otherwise, the convention will have been rendered ineffective. Due to timing of the Secretariat's report and the COP19 document submission deadline, the United States submitted its own draft decisions for Totaba for COP19. The United States expresses its thanks to the Secretariat for undertaking the second mission to Mexico and providing the parties with a current assessment of this urgent conservation and compliance issue. As noted in COP Doc 29.2.1, efforts by Mexico to address illegal harvest and trafficking of Totaba have not been sufficient and remain largely ineffective. After reviewing the report of the Secretariat in COP Doc 19, COP19 document 29.2.1, the United States notes the recommendations and draft decision proposed in the document. However, given the importance and urgency of this issue, the United States believes the recommendations must be stronger to address the compliance issue. As a way forward, we would like to propose working off of the Secretariat's proposed revisions to draft decisions 18292 to 18295 as presented in COP19 Doc 29.2.1. We have suggested revisions to the Secretariat's document to help bridge the gap between these documents regarding revision of the draft decisions. In short, these edits are designed to strengthen surveillance and enforcement in the zero tolerance area in the upper Gulf of California, including timely reporting and to address demand reduction. We would urge the parties to support our proposed edits to the Secretariat's document as this is necessary, we believe, to prevent extinction. If the Chair agrees with our proposed way forward, we are happy to offer the proposed edits in more detail at the appropriate time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United States, and thank you for your constructive approach working off the Secretariat's language. I think that that's really helpful in terms of moving this forward. I will open the floor for comments from parties on one or both of these documents. Mexico, you have the floor.
Yeah. Gracias.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We thank the Secretariat and the Government of the United States for documents 29.2.1 and 29.2.2 on Totaba and the vaquita, which are endemic and emblematic species for Mexico. We would particularly like to thank the Secretariat for recognizing Mexico's progress and confirming the significant deployment of human, material, and economic resources to fight illegal Totaba fishing and trade. This confirmed that Mexico has not remained idle, but rather that it has taken significant measures, as can be seen in the 6 semestral reports and the 2 comprehensive reports which were handed over to the Secretariat with documentary evidence. In addition to in-person and remote surveillance to prevent illegal fishing in the zero-tolerance area, Mexico has worked on new projects, for example, by laying down 193 concrete blocks with hooks and fostering the use of alternative fishing gear, with the involvement of local communities. To increase applicable sanctions when it comes to illegal Totaba trafficking, we modified our federal criminal code. Since COP18, 11 sentences have been handed down for possession of Totaba swim bladders against 15 individuals who were sanctioned with prison sentences, fines, and were made to pay compensation for the environment. And this shows that there is no impunity. Although Mexico has made positive advances by multiplying and diversifying its efforts, institutions involved in this issue, including fisheries, marine defense, environmental, customs, judiciary, and financial institutions, are aware that we must strengthen our coordination and ensure that each aspect of our regulation is enforced effectively. Our Secretariat for the Environment and Natural Resources informed us the day before yesterday that it will be holding a meeting at the highest level of authorities involved in this matter in order to develop a consistent and feasible action plan in order to consult with the Secretariat as recommended by the Standing Committee. We are also considering the possibility of a third mission carried out by the Secretariat when appropriate in order to review progress and for this mission to be open to more stakeholders if interested. Documents 29.2.1 of COP18 and 7.5 of the 75th Standing Committee contain different recommendations, and therefore we wish to ensure that this COP provides clarity when it comes to appropriate measures in order to avoid any confusion. On several occasions, it has been warned that Mexico's progress will not be sufficient or effective if we do not address international level issues. Therefore, it's urgent to carry out the study which we requested from the Secretariat in 2016 in order to understand what is happening with illegal Totaba trade networks beyond Mexico. This means that fighting illegal trade must go beyond Mexican borders. We need countries where there is supply and demand and which are transit and destination countries to fulfill their commitments and to recognize that they're co-responsible on this issue. This will require international cooperation mechanisms and not sanction threats. On Sunday, the possibility of sanctioning Mexico was put forward, although it's the country which has taken the strongest action, without taking into account that sanctions should only be applied to countries which are not interested in resolving the situation. By threatening to sanction Mexico, we are being treated unfairly. Although we have reports of seizures in United States and Asian countries, only some have shared this data. We thank the Special Administrative Region of Hong Kong for the shared information. However, most of the time we learn about these seizures through the press instead of official channels. In order to dismantle international criminal networks operating in this business, we must exchange information on ports and airports of origin, border points where swim bladders are transferred, individuals and organizations that transport, distribute, or buy products, the origin and destination of financial flows, etc. These are just some of the commitments that the states involved must meet. Therefore, we invite China and the United States to meet here in Panama in order to move forward in drafting the terms of reference of the Trilateral Enforcement Contact Group. We also wish to thank the Secretariat and parties for making it possible to hold the meeting of distribution, transit, and destination states of Totaba at the end of 2021. And we urge parties to the decisions that were adopted in this forum to focus on international cooperation in line with the objectives and spirit of this convention. Given the above, Madam Chair, we suggest creating a working group in order to come up with an appropriate drafting of the decisions proposed by the Secretariat in document 29.2.1 with the aim of addressing illegal Totaba trade throughout its chain and not only at the point of extraction. We are convinced that with the support of all involved stakeholders, we will be able to significantly move forward in our common objective of protecting Totaba and vaquita. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mexico, to interrupt you. You had reached 8 minutes. So I will take parties. China. China, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. As this is my first intervention as the head of the Chinese delegation at this COP, I would like to express my most sincere appreciation to Panama for their hospitality and to you for your excellent leadership. China attaches great importance to the trilateral cooperation in combating illegal trade in Totaba. We approved the terms of reference of the China, US, Mexico Totaba working group 6 months ago and readded ourselves to strengthen cooperation with relevant countries through this mechanism. I also hold bilateral talks with the heads of the delegations of the United States of America and Mexico the day before yesterday, respectively. As far as China is concerned, we have regarded the Totaba as a national key protected species, prohibited its trade, and cracked down hard on its illegal trade. In recent years, we made some Totaba seizures at our ports and domestic markets. The enforcement actions have been widely publicized in the media, and some seizure information have been shared with the relevant country, particularly Mexico. As a matter of urgency, China urged the United States to approve the terms of reference so that the TCG could begin to function as soon as possible, such that meaningful collaborative work could finally be able to be commenced to protect this species. At the same time, Mexico is urged to crack down on illegal fishing of Totaba. China is ready to provide its Totaba series information to the United States, Mexico, and other relevant parties for their follow-up investigations in an effort to dismantle the entire chain of illegal fishing and trade. I would also like to stress that it is not impossible for wildlife crime to be eliminated overnight, particularly in the developing countries such as Mexico. China, together with the international community, spent 2 decades to crack down on the poaching of and illegal trade in the Tibet antelope and to successfully elevate the threats it faces for the species to turn from endangered to vulnerable on the IUCN list, with an increase in its wild population from 75,000 to more than 300,000 individuals. What I want to express is that it is far from enough to rely solely on international cooperation to combat illegal trade. What is more crucial is to support the country of origin to combat illegal fishing and trade. One wild animal poached is one wild animal lost from the wild forever. So time is the essence in the protection of Totaba. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, China. New Zealand, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. New Zealand acknowledges the measures that Mexico has taken on this matter, and New Zealand supports the edits to the Secretariat's document that have been proposed by the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, New Zealand. Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Commissioner of Switzerland to the International Whaling Commission, I'm listening for more than 20 years to explanation and excuses around vaquita and Totaba. More than 20 years ago, we had more than 900 vaquitas left, and many urged Mexico to do something and to regulate or to change the fishing methods of the Totaba. That's more than 20 years ago. Now, from more than 900 animals, we are down to 10, and still we are discussing about having maybe a third trip to Mexico to discuss these issues. I mean, we can travel as many times as we wish. It doesn't help to save a species. And if a species where the problem is known for more than 20 years goes down from 900 to 10, it's hard to believe that the involved parties really did what they should have to do. So I'm extremely disappointed, and of course we will support and hope that there will be a common ground in regarding these two papers. But probably it's too late for the vaquita. Maybe we can save the Totaba. But I believe we missed the chance to do a lot more than we did. Thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland. United Kingdom, followed by Japan.
Thank you, Chair. The Totaba has long been subject to illegal fishing and illegal trade, which has not only negatively impacted this species, but also led to the significant decline of the vaquita. It is crucial to the conservation of both these species that parties eliminate supply and demand of illegally sourced specimens and actively support the recovery of Totaba and vaquita in the wild. The UK recognises the complexity of the situation in the Gulf of California and the challenges involved, and we welcome the efforts made by Mexico to date. However, we are significantly concerned by the lack of progress made in the areas highlighted by the Secretariat. It is essential to the future survival of 2 Appendix 1 listed species that urgent and effective action is taken to implement the decisions previously agreed. Time has almost run out for the vaquita, and unfortunately, failure to tackle this illegal trade means very soon our discussions here will no longer be about what we must do, but what we should have done. The UK thanks the US for bringing forward strengthened and measurable decisions. We recognise there are 2 documents under consideration, but our preference is for the decisions included in the document 29.2.2 tabled by the US. However, we would also support the decisions in the proposal from the Secretariat. We also welcome the decisions made at the 75th Standing Committee and strongly encourage Mexico to urgently develop and implement a comprehensive compliance plan to avoid the extinction of 2 Appendix 1 listed species. We do, however, note the interventions made by Mexico at SC 75 and today relating to the need for destination and transit countries to be held more accountable. We would therefore support more involvement of relevant destination and transit countries
in the compliance process and the implementation of the Compliance Action Plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United Kingdom. Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Japan recognizes that Mexico is investing numerous resources to prevent illegal fishing, and we support Mexico's proposed next steps. Japan encourages the Secretariat to initiate as soon as possible the study of the status of the illegal trade in Totaba. We understand this information is essential to understand the whole scope of the problem in order to suggest adequate actions to address the problem. Japan prefers 29.1.1, then 22.2, because the approach of the document places all the effort to combat this illegal trade on a single party, which is the point of extraction of the Totaba. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. European Union.
Thank you, Chair. The EU and its member states want to thank the Secretariat for all the work on this issue, especially for its second mission to Mexico and the substantial report thereof. We appreciate the good progress that was made by Mexico, but there are still areas for improvement, especially the controlling of unauthorized launching sites. We are worried that these are insufficient in preventing fishers using gill nets from entering the vaquita refuge and zero-tolerance areas, and therefore, these areas are not maintained and completely gill net-free. We urge Mexico to step up enforcement and focus on key places that might be used by fishers. Also, strict zero-tolerance policy and strict penalties should be implemented. Mexico needs to improve and streamline controls of fishermen in the Gulf to prevent circumvention. Enforcement also needs to be improved by inspecting possible places where manufacturing, possession, or selling of gill nets might occur, seizing unauthorized nets, and fining fishermen involved in illegal activities so that it does not pay them to continue these activities. Without strong and immediate actions, it will be possible to prevent the extinction of the vaquita. We are open to consider additional points. Thank you very much.
Thank you, European Union. I have 5 more parties on my list, so I will close my list. And I will take them in the order that I see them. Senegal, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senegal notes that the critical situation of the Totaba is disastrous. During the COP in Johannesburg, decisions were adopted on Totaba McDonald's. At the time, we thought that there were around 30 individuals. 6 years later, the population has declined by 67% to reach around 10 individuals. At this rate of decline, the Totaba will have likely disappeared by the next COP. Given the arguments put forward by Mexico and the proposal of the United States, this fish actually shares a name with myself. My name is Abba, and the fish is called Totaba. And therefore, we wish to support it, and we also welcome the comments provided by the United States.
Thank you, Senegal. Nigeria.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving us the floor again. This Nigeria intervention on vaquita document 29.2.1 and document 29.2.2 combined. Nigeria thanks Mexico, the United States, and the Secretariat for the information provided on this critical issue. We have had the many actions taken by Mexico over the year, but the vaquita population is still suffering from illegal fishing and international trafficking in Totaba. The findings from the Secretariat mission were very helpful in understanding the enforcement effort to date. Nigeria knows that the Secretariat expressed concern about the effectiveness of Mexico implementation, taking those findings and other information into account. The Standing Committee has asked Mexico to prepare a compliant action plan. Therefore, on this premise, Nigeria strongly supports the amendments offered by the United States to the Secretariat decision because it will help it clear the conference of the party consider this as an urgent issue that requires intense attention and ongoing action. I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigeria. I'll take Niger, followed by Benin. Niger.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Niger thanks the Secretariat and the United States for information provided on this critical matter. Madam Chair, we are concerned by the situation of the Totaba. In our view, every effort must be undertaken to save this species, which is on the brink of extinction. This is our duty, and we must not remain idle. We support the amendment submitted by the United States to the Secretariat's decision, which will show that the COP considers this to be an urgent matter to be dealt with without further ado. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Niger. Benin, followed by Canada.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We appreciate parties' interest regarding this matter and the commitment of the CITES Secretariat. We are deeply concerned by the situation and status of Totaba McDonaldi, and in line with this, we support the United States proposal because we're strongly convinced that this proposal will enable us to strengthen surveillance and, above all, to prevent the species from going extinct. Now, we, of course, are not calling into question the efforts made by Mexico, but we believe these efforts are necessary to ensure that the species does not go extinct. So we support the United States proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Benin. And my final party is Canada. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. We, like many others here, recognize the collective conservation concern. We acknowledge, what's been said, the work to date, etc. We have examined both the documents provided, 29.1 and 2. We also acknowledge the gentleman from the United States suggested that they have also looked at both of the documents and may have some suggestions to bridge the two, and so we would be open to hearing that further, and thank you for your time on the floor.
Thank you, Canada. I've heard from the parties that have requested the floor, so I would like to open for a few observers. Thank you. I say Sea Shepherd Legal. Sea Shepherd Legal, you have the floor.
Gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to provide a technical update on behalf of our sister organization, Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, which are currently working on the front line in Mexico as regards the zero tolerance area. They are working hard to protect the Totaba species. We hope that this will contribute to these discussions. We carry out periodic reports on fishing in this area, and you can find these on our website. These reports lay out the number of ships that have been seen, but they also show how the number of ships evolves throughout the day in real time. This is regarding the zero tolerance area. This method of work and collaboration with local fishers enables us to ensure the enforcement of the zero tolerance area. And it's also important when it comes to obtaining information on the situation. It's important to state that there are vessels in the zero tolerance area. However, it's important to note that the presence of these vessels has decreased thanks to the interventions made by Mexico. We believe it's important to recognize that, as set out in the information provided by our sister organization, the government of Mexico are working strongly to ensure that vessels remain outside of the zero tolerance area. Lastly, let me share that our sister organization, Sea Shepherd, have stated that Seahorse, the new ship, have begun their journey towards the Gulf of California, and this vessel will be able to stay in the water for a long time near the zero tolerance area in order to provide additional support to the government of Mexico. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Sea Shepherd Legal. I have one more observer asking for the floor, so I will take one more observer. Animal Welfare Institute, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I make this intervention on behalf of the Animal Welfare Institute, Center for Biological Diversity, Environmental Investigation Agency, Natural Resources Defense Council, Eurogroup for Animals, Robin Dubois, Wild Aid, Born Free, Law of the Wild, and Oceana. We thank the Secretariat in the United States for their documents and align ourselves with the comments made by the United States, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Senegal, Nigeria, and other countries that raised concerns, serious concerns about this situation. As I noted on Sunday at SC 75, the vaquita porpoise is heartbreakingly close to extinction due to entanglement in illegal gill nets used to capture Totaba, shrimp, and other species in the upper Gulf of California. Totaba are caught due to the immense value of their swim bladders that are trafficked to Asia and primarily China. This is the third CITES COP in which the parties will be urging Mexico to meet its obligation to control the trade of Totaba from its borders. When the parties first engaged on this issue, as other speakers have said, there were 30 vaquita. Today, only 10 remain. Despite Mexico's repeated promises to get this situation under control, it has not, making this a situation of incredible conservation urgency. The parties have asked Mexico to eliminate vessels and gill nets in vaquita habitat, particularly the zero tolerance area and vaquita refuge. 3 COPs later, vessels and gill nets are routinely found in these protected areas. As an example, during its mission, the Secretariat documented 15 fishing vessels launching illegally without the required inspection in just over an hour from the seashore in San Felipe. They also noted that fishermen reported that illegal fishing occurs daily and in plain sight without any consequence. Less than 2 weeks ago, on November 6th, the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, as noted by the previous speaker, reported as many as 30 pangas illegally present in the zero tolerance area and a high of 110 vessels in the vaquita refuge, all engaged in net fishing. The day before, as many as 160 vessels were identified fishing for shrimp, likely using illegal gill nets in the vaquita refuge. This level of enforcement is not and cannot be acceptable. We need action, not more reports or missions. We believe this record justifies an immediate suspension of trade. Sanctions, when the alternative is extinction, are not disproportionate or unfair. Barring that possibility, the parties must direct Mexico in the strongest and clearest language possible that this cannot continue. Accordingly, we support the United States' proposed decision text on this issue, which we feel is both stronger and clearer than that offered by the Secretariat. But we welcome the Secretariat's text with amendments proposed by the United States. Finally, Madam Chair, we further urge the parties to direct the Standing Committee at SC 77, when it reviews both Mexico's implementation of the compliance plan and the current decision text, to consider compliance measures and expressly state that the Standing Committee consider a potential trade suspension against Mexico if illegal fishing continues. With 10 vaquita remaining, this is CITES' last chance to get it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Animal Welfare Institute. So, having heard our discussion, what I'm hearing is quite a bit of support for the United States decisions. But I have had the United States offer to work on a consolidated version between the secretariats and their version, and I have heard some support and interest in looking at that common ground. So I'm looking to the US to see if you would still seek to work on your decisions.
Madam Chair, thank you. Without objection, I would like to turn it over to my colleague to offer our draft edits to the proposal.
If you could just hold that, I'm just interested in what your proposal might be, because I think I have seen a draft and it is a little bit extensive for the floor to follow. So I'm asking you whether or not you are still prepared to offer your edits to the committee.
Madam Chair, we'd like to go forward with our edits.
Thank you, United States. So I think what we will be doing is giving the US some time to share their proposed amendments with the committee. I've heard Mexico asking for a working group. I wonder if it might be a little bit simpler for the United States to take their documents to the interested parties directly rather than setting up a working group. I mean, I can set up a working group if you like, if that would be more simple.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not entirely sure of the question. We certainly don't believe that a working group would be constructive. Would prefer to try to get these in front of the committee now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we will need to do that via an in-session document rather than reading them directly into the record. It's just a little bit complicated to do in this forum to the degree that you seem to have done so. So if you can arrange to have them officially submitted via a in-session document, a COM document, that would be great, and we will come back to them. I think this is a really constructive way forward. I just would like people to be able to actually see them, and I don't have any other way to do that.
Thank you.
I have Mexico requesting the floor. Mexico?
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Chair. On how to proceed with regard to this document, our delegation has a detailed analysis that compares both documents, the Secretariat's and the U.S. proposals. We have 20 proposed amendments following the recommendation of the Secretariat in document 29.1. They suggest not adopting the proposals of the United States because many of them are redundant or do not coincide with different parts. So we could mention each of the 20 to 30 comments we have. This is why we think it's more appropriate to work on this in a working group. There are several errors and inconsistencies in the U.S. document, and we cannot accept document 29.2.2 for the reasons previously explained. So we are in your hands.
Thank you, Mexico. Based on your statement, I will establish a working group to consider the two documents in front of us and the United States proposed amendments and also the analysis that Mexico has completed. So I will have to establish a working group. I don't think that it's efficient use of the time in the committee room here to go through all of those. matters. So I will establish a working group on these two documents to consider the two documents, the comments from the Secretariat, the US's decisions, as well as the US's proposed edits and Mexico's information. So I will, if you could clear my list. Oh, US, do you need the floor? US.
Yes, Chair, thank you. We understood that you had already made a decision to allow us to submit a document for review and discussion at a later time, so that's inconsistent with establishment of a working group at this time. Thank you.
Mexico, but it is your document. So we will consider that document next week at this stage. Mexico, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I would like some more clarification on what you're suggesting. You're suggesting that a COM document be established. I'm not clear on what that is. Normally, though, that would be the outcome of a working group. But in any case, we reserve the right to present our document if we don't agree with a number of opinions. And so this is why we see the need for a group. And we would invite the committee to consider the comments of the Secretariat, where it says that some points are redundant, and it is our pleasure to sit down with the United States. And so it would be a joint document and not just of the United States, because we would have submitted our document. So we would appreciate some clarification from the chair on this.
Mexico, your thinking is similar to mine. So that's the basis on which I've invited the United States to communicate with you to see if there's a single COM document that could be submitted. You're right that often COM documents are the results of working groups, but we also see them based on small drafting groups or bilateral negotiations where there are two parties particularly engaged on individual matters, particularly where there are revisions to decisions or resolutions. So that's why I'm inviting that as the mechanism. So I will hold my idea of a working group, your suggestion, until I see what we see, and if we need a working group, we will go there. If that's suitable to you, Mexico, I will go back to United States.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to clarify that there are edits that we will be submitting in a COM document is working off of the report from the Secretariat rather than our document 29.22.
Thank you, United States, for the clarity. I have one more party asking for the floor. I was hopeful for us to introduce the next document, but I will take China. China, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I echo the proposal of Mexico. This is the meeting's business. It's not the country of United States and America and Mexico. And also China is another very important side. So my proposal is that we should have a working group, and we invite the relevant parties to join it and try to get a consensus there, then submit the proposal to this committee for adopted. That's my proposal. Thank you. Working group.
Thank you, China. I've indicated that I might consider the need for a working group. I would just like to see the documents that I've requested first. The usefulness of having them in COM docs or in session documents is that the committee can see them and can engage on them. So obviously, once we have the documents, I will be encouraging parties to consider them. And then once we have seen them and the committee has considered them, I will decide whether or not a working group will be productive. So that's the decision I've taken at this point in time. The matter is not closed, but that's my decision for now. Mexico.
Gracias, señora.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to thank the distinguished delegate of China for his intervention, because some of the comments we made in our first intervention relates to the participation of the entire chain with regard to the fishing of Totaba. And this is why we proposed in our TOR, the involvement of the three groups of countries, the three countries involved in the updating of the proposals made by the Secretariat. We then could take into account the different perspectives to better deal with the issue. We think that is a good proposal that has been made by China. And so we hope that we will be able to move forward on the terms of reference. But we would like to express our thanks to China for their intervention.
Thank you, Mexico. So we do have a little over 10 minutes left. I'm going to consult with the Secretariat on the most efficient use of our time. Thank you, everyone. As it is the weekend in about 10 minutes, I am not going to take CoP19, document 19 on CITES and forests, because I think we owe that a bit more of a cohesive discussion. So I will take that document first thing on Monday morning to try to use some time. I would like to propose that we consider summary record 4, which has been available since this morning. So I would like to take comments on summary record 4 if parties are prepared. United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to summary record for the 4th session, we have a minor amendment. This is with regard to agenda item 13 on engagement of Indigenous peoples and local communities. It's page 3 in the English version, and it's the 3rd paragraph. And the paragraph begins with the United States of America. And our suggestion is to delete the words "as provided" through to "and." And so I'll read the paragraph or the sentence with our amendment. The United States of America was of the opinion that parties should engage Indigenous peoples and local communities, parentheses IPLC, in CITES processes at the national level. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all of our amendments to this record document. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. We've captured that. So I will ask the Secretariat to make some announcements. I will take summary record 5 on Monday, so please be having a look at that over the weekend if you get a chance. I will take it first thing on Monday if I can. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. A few announcements. Due to the earlier evacuation of Committee 1, they lost an hour, so the Committee 1 will continue for an additional hour until 6 o'clock. That, of course, has an impact on the side event that was scheduled to take place in Canal 3. That side event has been moved to ISTMO 2. So it's CITES and Fisheries will now take place in ISTMO 2. So please take note of that. And then, of course, the Working Group on Action Plan on Gender-Related Matters will meet at 5:15 in Caribe 6. I would like to please remind everyone not to remove the headsets and these receivers from the venue. If you, by accident, took some with you, please make sure that you return it tomorrow. Please make sure you do not leave with the receivers and the headsets, please. And I think that's it from my side. Oh, and please do not forget your voting cards in the machines. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Secretariat. Thank you, everyone, for your diligence and your contributions this week. I hope you enjoy your weekends. Please get some rest. Please enjoy Panama. Please stay healthy and safe. And I will see you on Monday morning at 8:45.